Okay, so today I am going to be joined. I'm waiting for her to come in on and join me by my friend Deanna. Again, she's the one that came on. Hello. She's the one that came on with me a couple weeks ago, and we ended up talking about like homeschooling and different like philosophies of education. So she's read every classic novel there is to read. And I just read Little Women for the first time, so I asked her to come on and talk to me about it because that's the type of book you read and you have to talk to somebody about it. Especially since everybody else in the world has read this book except for me. So I finally read it at the age of 46, and now I have some thoughts. So let's see if I can get her on here. You have so much art.
Yeah. All over the house. It's everywhere.
I keep threatening to sell all my stuff, but I am so afraid of shipping it. I can't give myself.
Don't do it. Just keep it.
I have
You always buy
what
you buy what you like, so just hang it up and make gallery walls all over your house like I did.
I know. Well, some of the stuff is not exactly my taste. Like the little needlepoint things, like it's cute, but it's not exactly my taste. But
I like
for now,
them.
until I can figure out how to ship them or get over my fear of shipping, I'm just gonna keep them.
Yeah, it's hard to ship pictures and glass and stuff.
I know. I'm so nervous about it. The White Pepper Vintage. Do you follow her on Instagram?
Mm-mm.
She's got an amazing vintage account. Really gorgeous. But she has a whole tutorial on her Instagram stories highlights about how to ship things, like how to ship things that have glass and things like that. Oh, look at that. Use pool noodles. I never thought of that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay,
like
Deanna, we're supposed to talk about Little Women. I was supposed to skim the book again, and I know you skimmed the book again. So it would be fresh on my mind.
Skimmed. I wanted to reread the whole thing and do my curriculum for it. Yeah, that didn't happen. Because,
Okay, well, here's one question I thought for you before we get into what I thought about it. Let's say you're doing a high school curriculum. Is that what you're going to do?
It would probably be middle school for Little Women.
Okay, so you're doing a middle school curriculum with Little Women. Well, I don't even know how to ask this question without it just being too broad. But where would you go with it? Like, just some highlights. Like, where would you go with that curriculum? What do you think the typical middle schooler is going to get out of that book?
Well, we have a very particular way we do it. So in middle school, we talk about heroes. And so there are different aspects of heroes. And there are, for us in the modern world, this novel seems really old-fashioned. But if you take it in the context of when it was written and think about her dad was a transcendentalist, and, it opens with Pilgrim's Progress, and it's showing how to live a good moral life. At the time, that's a heroic thing to do.
Really?
And so, the sacrifices that are made, I think that the girls make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes them heroic. I don't know how much we want to get into the novel. By the way, there'll be spoilers.
They make their own decisions within a little framework in which they're allowed to make their own decisions.
But they do, because, even Amy decides that she can't marry for love. They're making their own decisions. Joe turned Lori down.
Yeah.
So, and so it's, I think that because of that, there is that sort of duty and all of that stuff, but within that construct of what it was like in the 1860s, I think that they're quite independent-minded, the four girls.
And their
some
parents
more than
encouraged
others.
that. Without going crazy, they encouraged it, without going too far out of the box.
But, they wanted them to be good and they wanted them to be happy.
Yeah.
And that was set forth. The parents said that, and they weren't wealthy, but they figured it out, they had to deal with that. So I think that this would fit in being heroic. The girls are heroic.
Well, I had my neighborhood book club this past weekend. We all sat in circle outside, but which is much better than Zoom. I was so glad we did not do another Zoom book club. We're all right here in this tiny little neighborhood. So I was talking about how we were going to do this, and one of my book club members said she remembers still, and she's 20 years older than me, in sixth grade reading Little Women for the first time, and then like reading every other ancillary attached to Little Women book that she could get her hands on. And I admit I have trouble imagining myself as a sixth grader picking up that book and actually finishing it.
Oh yeah, you're talking to someone.
I mean,
but you know, I was reading poetry, and I was that girl. You know, I was reading classics. By the time I got into high school and we were reading, you know, Shakespeare, even 8th grade, and they assigned some Shakespeare, I'd already read them all.
oh my gosh, Deanna.
I'm just one of those.
You are such a Hermione. Oh my gosh.
I am. It's so funny. I'm always in the front of the room too, like the classroom. No, I know the answer. I know the answer. Pick me.
Are you an insufferable know-it-all?
No.
One of my favorite Snape lines.
I'd like to say that I'm not insufferable.
Yeah, you're not insufferable.
I might be a know-it-all.
So bad for Hermione in that moment. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And we're not even going to talk about Snape because I hate that people like him. Anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, I was impressed because I can't imagine myself as a sixth grader, my attention being maintained reading a book like that, because I do feel like it started out kind of slow. And, you know, I remember telling you that I felt like the first half of the book, I'm like, okay, so they're reading their Bible, they're trying to be even extra good when they're already good to begin with, but they're really like hard on themselves, and we're just going to be even more good and bring even more food to the poor neighbors and be even more dutiful to our parents. And that was like the whole first half of the book.
Well, yeah, so you know that she published the first half and then she went and wrote the second half, right?
Oh, really? Okay, tell me about that.
So it was
I don't
like
know anything about the history of it.
Yeah, so originally it was Good Little Women, and then it was like Good Wives. And in England, when they published it, it was still split. So you can find 2 different volumes of it. Oh. But here and in the modern world, they lumped them together, which is why there's that big gap of time.
And
then the girls have matured. Yeah, and then you get, you know, the follow-up books, and then, you know, they follow like Joe's Boys, and you follow what's going on with them as they grow up, and you have like the 8 cousins and things like that.
Right.
But, you know, she was asked to write this book. She was asked by a publisher to write a book for girls, and she's like, I don't know what to write. And she looked around and she's like, well, I got these sisters. I guess we're entertaining, maybe. She didn't think it would be popular because she was just really kind of writing about her family. Yeah. And it was a big hit. So it's interesting.
That reminds me of one of the things that I just didn't really understand about the book. And that was the weirdness around Joe writing. So sometimes like her parents seem to really encourage her and be proud of her writing, but then her future husband, you know, the way that he talked about her writing, it was really strange, and she really internalized that there was something like morally questionable about the type of writing that she was doing and that she shouldn't be writing. And I just found that so confusing.
So when she first started writing, she wrote the little stories and she didn't tell anybody, right? And they got published in the newspaper, and then it's really sweet. I love that scene when she's reading to her family, and then at the end tells them, yeah, this is mine. I got published.
Oh, yeah.
It was really sweet. So she's then asked to write like a sensational story, and she doesn't want to do it, but they need the money. Right. And so when she's in New York, when she meets Dr. Bear, I don't know how to say his last name, I can't remember, but when she meets him, she's writing and selling these sensational stories, and she doesn't want to write them, but she's making really, really good money. So to her, she's kind of selling out. Yeah. And then she hears the professor like speak on these, you know, sermons or something, and he shares with her that he doesn't really appreciate the sensational writing, and she's pretty upset about that. So, you know, even though she's kind of the rebel of the girls, and Joe is modeled after Louisa May Alcott, like they're, you know, that's her in the story, obviously. And so I think that when she was asked to write this book, I think that she put that in because maybe that's what she was feeling.
It was just
there's quite a bit of biographical stuff here.
I think that it was coming from him, and it just seemed kind of sanctimonious, the way that he was talking to her about it. It just seemed very complicated. And I felt like at times she wasn't even really talking about writing that type of, like, you know, popular stuff. It was more just writing in general. I felt like she was. And
I don't remember that. Like I said, I didn't reread. I just kind of skimmed. So I don't remember that. So I'll be curious when I do sit down to read it. You know, it's 400 to 600 pages, depending on what version you read.
Long.
It's a commitment.
Like,
it's long.
No, sixth grade me would not be reading a 400 to 600 page book. I'm sorry, no. But yeah, I think that was one of the most interesting things to me, is just that her strange, conflicted relationship with her writing, and just thinking about the messages that she would, if she was a person today, what kind of messages she would be receiving about her writing, and whether she'd just be getting all of this raw girl power messaging about her writing and nobody would question her, or if, you know, she would, or, you know, if you're even allowed to question people like that anymore, you know, about the nature of their writing. I mean, maybe if you're really close, but they weren't really close at the time, you know, she just met him.
Yeah, but I mean, they were friends, and, you know, he's older and learned, and he's, you know, showing, you know, he gives her this Shakespeare book, and he's teaching her German. So there's that kind of, you know, she's looking up to him. Thing. So, and he's a professor, and I was a professor, and we freely give advice whether we are asked to or not. So maybe it's just part of that. I don't know.
It's almost like, you know, and maybe it was just that he was a man and she was a woman, that it just kind of like, I don't know. Yeah,
it's really hard to go back and read a lot of these classics with our 21st century lens, like how we see the world. And so that's why, like, context and understanding the background, I think, is so important. And
well,
just,
and
you know,
like it was simpler back then, because, like, I don't know why I got hooked on thinking about, okay, if she was alive today and she was writing things that she was maybe not quite proud of but was making a ton of money, how would people go about, like, having that conversation with her, even her loved ones? I don't see people being that honest about, I just don't think that's a morally upstanding thing to do these days. I think maybe everybody just thinks a little bit more gray, and it's, you know, you do you.
But think,
you know,
of it, if you take it out of the writing, though, and if you think about someone, just think about dating. So someone's dating someone that is really bad for them. Do you say something? You know what I mean? So some people would, and some people wouldn't. So maybe it's a personality thing too, you know? Like, if my sister was doing something,
they're just hating on her, you know? They're just hating on her. So
if my sister was doing something that I thought was a little shady, I'd probably call her out on it.
Yeah, I can see your point. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, just that whole dialogue. And then I also, man, those trips they took to Europe back then. Oh my gosh, can I do that?
I know. I'm going to go on the grand
tour. See you next year.
I know. It's so crazy. And they just, like, you know, go to all the gardens and do all this stuff. And, you know, just, I'm going to, you know, we're going to go to Switzerland, and then we'll head down to Italy for 6 months. I always think in dollars. I'm like, who can afford that?
It kind of makes you wish it wasn't so easy to travel, because I think the fact that it's so easy to travel means we'll just go and come right back. But if you have to take a ship and it takes you forever to get there,
it's
you're
true.
Gonna stay a while.
So what did you think about each of the girls? Like, what are your, I guess you're supposed to be interviewing me, but I'm just curious about the individual personality traits. Like, what did you think about them?
Well, I guess I didn't have as pleasant of an opinion of, who was the one that died? Was that Beth?
Beth, yeah.
Okay, of her.
Okay.
I just felt like, okay, yes, she's very sweet, but
she's kind of flat for me too.
Pathologically shy, and that I don't think should have been encouraged the way it was. You know what I mean? Like they pass that off as some kind of positive character trait that
Yeah.
so bashful and shy, and I don't know.
Yeah, she's probably the one, even as when I was young, that I didn't really see much I could identify with.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
seems to just be, and again, it's a time thing. Demure girls would be looked upon as being good, but, Joe's outspoken, Meg is dutiful, Amy's Amy.
Yeah, I mean, she's got like a
She's
loud
spunky.
personality. Yeah,
Yeah,
a
she's
loud
very
personality.
spunky.
And Beth was just the wallflower. I mean,
Yeah,
she's like the family
exactly.
dog.
Yeah.
There's just not much to her other than just appearing to be traditionally feminine and perfect because she doesn't leave the house or do anything besides.
Right.
So,
Yeah, she's an interesting, in a weird way, kind of an interesting character, especially from today's point of view. We're like, oh my gosh, get over yourself. Come on.
Yeah, she was weird. And so what, I mean, I meant to look into this. Like, what did she die of? What would that be diagnosed as at this point? Like tuberculosis? She didn't have tuberculosis.
Yeah, something that would take a long time because she was sickly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't even know. They never described like the tuberculosis, like coughing and violence.
Oh, okay, so she got scarlet fever. So she was sickly after she got scarlet fever.
Right. So she just was sickly. So could have been, something related to that, compromised immune system. And Alcott, like Elizabeth, who they called Lizzie, Alcott's real sister, died also. So again, this really mirrors the sisters and their personalities. I think it was last year, maybe the year before. It's all running together now since we've been at home, my memory. But we were on the East Coast, and I went to Louisa May Alcott's house, and you can visit it. And I learned quite a bit about the family, more than I knew before. And it was really interesting. I mean, there's even like graffiti in the room where Amy was of like her drawings and stuff on the walls.
Really?
And they're covered with plexiglass right now, so they're protected. But you can see, and her artwork is hanging, and it's a small little house. And so I was thinking about the personalities, and like, Joe's a big personality, and Meg likes to act, and them acting out these little plays, and the rooms are pretty small. And then I think, the one that I could see in there the most was always Beth, because it's small, and, she would have just been sitting there.
Yeah. Sitting in a corner doing her thing.
Yep.
Oh, man. So where is it located?
It's in Concord, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Along
Concord,
with
Massachusetts.
Every other important literary person
Yeah,
or
so
thing
it was
that's ever existed.
Yeah, I mean, I went to Walden Pond, like on the same trip. I went to Walden Pond. I saw Thoreau's grave. The house where Louisa May Alcott, next to it is a house where, totally forgetting her name, the woman who wrote Five Little Peppers. She lived there, and like there's all these different writers that had lived there. It's this huge yellow house. It was just amazing. And it was pretty incredible. So one day
and they were all around the same time period?
Similar time periods. Yeah, like Thoreau was friends with her father, so she would have met him.
So it's always interesting to me when a little city has a little burst of creativity all around the same time.
Yeah, it was amazing. And Emerson also. It was just incredible. So I saw all their houses. So one day I just drove around and did this literary tour. And then a different day I did a Revolutionary War tour and went to Lexington and Concord. But it was fun. If you get a chance and you're in Boston, it's worth the drive over.
I've never in my life been to Boston.
Oh, it's a really fun town.
It's crazy. Now, I used to go to Amherst all the time. So I've been to Western Mass a million times because I have family there. I grew up in New York State, so we would just go up to Amherst, but I've never been to Boston. So
it's a very fun city if you like literature and history like I do.
Yeah.
That's all I do is go to all the little sites.
Yeah, I would love to do that someday. Okay, so somebody asked a question about boys reading Little Women. I mean, I can't imagine they'd be too interested.
Yeah. So we plan on using it with our curriculum.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that you can make the argument that, there is value in boys reading this.
Oh, sure.
And definitely, just understanding sort of the plight of what girls went through. Just like we have girls reading things that maybe seem like a little more boy.
Mm-hmm.
I just read this Western book called Shane, and then we're going to be teaching Captain's Courageous, and we usually kind of think of those as like boys literature.
Right.
But I think that that's really unfair.
Oh, sure.
Because I read both, like what would be boys, like Treasure Island and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if you narrow, and even in the modern world, I think we don't do this as much, but that there's always something to be gained. There's always people you can identify, character traits that you can identify with, but even learning just how to deal with other humans by reading.
I'll tell you what, it has a lot to teach boys about how girls perceive boys.
Yes.
And what girls want from boys.
Yes.
And what makes a good man. Because Laurie has that whole awakening when he's in Europe about what kind of man he is, and finally has to do something with his life.
Right.
And to be worthy. And the women are often talking about men that way. Like, is that a worthy person, or is he just flittering around entertaining himself?
Right. Or even like, I think men or males have a perception of what women want or think about, and it's very different. And just like we have a perception of what men, unless we open up those lines of communication and try to understand, then I definitely think it has a value for men. And I just because it's called Little Women, I don't think that it should be, just a girl's book. Yeah. But even, like The Secret Garden, there's a lot of Anne of Green Gables. Mm-hmm. I think all of those are universal. There are universal themes that you can pick up elements of what is human, and this can help me learn, live on this planet with so many other people. Right.
Yep. I agree. I mean, it was very female centric. Like, I'm just thinking about what a background character the dad was versus the mom.
Oh yeah.
But Laurie was a very strong character.
He is in there, and then some of the male friends, I'm again not remembering all of the names, but they're friends from England that Amy then sees when she's in Europe.
Yeah. And I think we already talked about when I was foxering you about this, when Amy goes off to live with the worldly people for a week, and they doll her up and everything, and she comes back and has that talk with mom about worldliness. Mm-hmm. I loved that part so much.
It's funny though, because their life is, and that's all she wants. She wants the sophisticated, glamorous life. I mean, that's really what she's desiring. And then when she has a chance to get it, she realizes, maybe not.
Yeah, this is ridiculous. These people are silly.
I know. They talk about me when I dress this way, and then they talk about me worse when I dress this way.
Right. And they don't really seem to care, like, what type of person you are, but what kind of, what you're projecting.
Yeah, I mean, it's very shallow.
There's a huge lesson in there for kids of that middle school, those middle school years, to learn from Amy having that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that, and then also, the girls have to make the decision. The novel opens up with, they have money. Christmas is not coming. What are they going to do with their money, right? Yeah. And they're like, first, like, I'm going to spend it on myself. We should all buy ourselves something. And then they're like, no, we should buy mom, So I think that this kind of a novel can model behavior and kind of teach kids, if I do this, this may happen. Or if I do this, that sort of consequences. Because there are a lot of consequences
hidden in there.
I'm sorry?
There's a lot of philosophy hidden in that book.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the benefits and that it makes you happy to do your own work and not, like to be industrious instead of idle.
Right.
And so many other things about what makes people actually happy. I mean, I know that they've done studies on money, and that if you want lasting happiness from money, the best thing you can do with it is spend it on somebody else. Yeah. So there's little nuggets of wisdom in all of those choices that they make.
There are, and that's why, even when we started this conversation, why I think they're heroic is that they are actively making their own choices. Mm-hmm. The father isn't telling the girls who to marry. That's true. And the mother, she's truly a matriarch of the family. When she goes, when dad is sick and goes, everything falls apart. When the girls decide not to do their work and then she takes the day off, I love that.
Me too.
They realize, they're like, oh, I guess there are consequences if you don't do your work, so.
And it's boring if you're not doing work. That's the
exactly
philosophical truth. It's boring if your life is just idleness and seeking entertainment. It's
crazy to think about.
Yeah. Okay, so the big thing is, like, I just don't understand the whole okay, well, I've talked to this guy like 5 times, so if he comes to me and asks me to marry him, I'm going to say yes. Because, we've had 5 conversations now.
That's a time period thing. That's a time period, yeah.
You'd think it would be a little bit more involved than that, than just, okay, well, I've gotten this somewhat good impression of you, so let's just go ahead and do it.
But at least the girls are actively making that decision.
Yeah.
Not that far before, long before that. Or even still during that time, even today in some cultures, women or girls don't have the opportunity to make that choice.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of funny to think about, it's not the dad and some other man behind the scenes making these arrangements, to align families or for dowry exchanges or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that even today, a lot of women don't have the choices that they had back in the 1860s.
I know. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. But I still think it's nuts. I still think it's, this is a lifelong choice you're making based on,
hopefully,
a few fleeting conversations.
Mm-hmm. But don't you know when you know?
I don't know. Their circles are so small. That's the thing.
It's true. Well, Amy's worldly.
Yeah. Well, she sure is when she goes to Europe. She's meeting all kinds of guys.
I know.
Your circle is just really teeny tiny. So who do you have to choose from?
It's true.
Just whoever happens to cross your path.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one thing that I just think would be the most that I would not like the least is that small feeling of your world just being so compressed. That you just can't go anywhere or do anything. It's a big production, and so you're just mostly home doing home stuff, and it just
knitting,
small little life. Even though we're all going through that right now.
Yeah.
To a small extent, that we can't really go out and do things, and when we do, it's kind of a production and so novel and interesting. And I think of Laura too, going into town after all those days out on the prairie. But
exactly.
Still, I wouldn't choose that.
No, but actually I'm thinking I kind of want that now. I want a farm and some land out in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I tried that. I was lonely.
Yeah.
Even with all my people around me, I like to see strangers and be out walking about and stuff like that. So I felt lonely out in the country.
Yeah, the older I get, the more introverted I am. So, thinking of Little Women, I'm like, yeah, that sounds pretty nice.
Yeah, just puttering around it and pluck it, and then gonna cook it for 5 hours.
For 5 hours, yeah.
What else am I going to do? Or their picnic, you know, that whole day-long picnic that they had.
Oh, that was really sweet.
Yeah. And Amy, oh, poor Amy, when she tried to throw that party and nobody came.
I know, for her art friends. I know. Don't you just feel horrible for her?
Yes, yes.
And she spent so much money on it, and then it rained, and she had to redo it.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember crying when I was young because, I mean, I don't know. I was just like so sad.
But it was a good lesson. You
It
know,
was.
like I think
Don't try to put on airs.
Exactly. And know who your real friends are, and that you don't have to, you know, act a certain way or, you know, put on airs for them to like you. And if you do, then they're not really your friends.
Right. Yeah. So. Who do you think grows the most is out of the 4 girls? Who do you think grows the most out of the 4 girls
Amy.
From beginning to end?
Amy.
Yeah, I
but
think
maybe
so
that's
too.
just because she was the youngest, and so she goes through that transformational time. You know, from child, she really goes from child to young adult, and that over the course of that book, versus the other ladies are a little bit more formed in their character. I mean, Beth just stays the same. She's the family dog, but you know, I mean, I didn't really see Jo changing all that much.
Jo,
Maybe
I don't think changes.
Settling in, but not necessarily changing.
Yeah, I don't think she changes. And then poor Meg, she has to figure out how to be married. Yeah, that hasn't
gotten any easier over the years.
No. She's like doting on the children, and their husband's like, yeah, peace out, see you later.
Yep.
And her mom's like, well, this may be what you should do. Maybe you should doll yourself up a little, which you could say back then. I don't know if we can say that now, but.
Exactly. That's another thing that I was like, that is problematic in today's culture.
But see, I'm old-fashioned. I like that.
Well, see, I'm conflicted about it too, because on the one hand, it's true, okay? It's true.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's going back to, it's the woman's job to fix that. And it would be nice if I felt like it was the husband's job to understand it, instead of just going off and doing his own thing. So it kind of is like putting all the blame and all the weight on fixing that on the woman who's dealing with the children and all of that stuff.
Right.
It's just one more thing that is her responsibility to take care of. And on the one hand, I like that. I mean, I am a pretty traditional person. Like, I mean, I've been mostly a stay-at-home mom since I was 21 years old, you know? So I do feel like I'm in charge of the tone and the emotional tenor of my family. But at the same time, wait a second. Like, he has some responsibility too to, you know, maybe find some way to help or to bring more help in or to, I don't know, something. But it was just about her, and I know that's very traditional and part of the time, and that's what a lady's job was, but I was just like,
But it's interesting, when she does that, he starts helping with the kids. So it could be that she was focused all of her attention on the children, ignoring him, and he just got pouty. That's what I think now as an adult. As a kid, I didn't really understand it.
It's literally the same thing that happens today. I mean, literally the same thing.
Nothing ever changes.
No. Just so focused on the kids and convinced that nobody else can do it the right way. So the dad can't even help. And then the mom gets resentful and the dad just steps away. And it's just this dance. And until somebody, I guess, decides to stop it. Or recognize that it is a dance.
And then that's why her mom's like, doll yourself up, pay a little attention to him. And it worked. Then he started helping out with the kids, and so I don't know about if you have to doll yourself up in the modern world, but, you know, I think it's communication really is what it boils down to.
Well, and the message might be, don't wait for somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
Because you can guarantee in a marriage that other person is feeling just as resentful as you are. So, you know, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you're always like thinking of yourself as the grieved party, you know, because it goes both ways. So you might be the one to take the initiative and do the right thing.
Sometimes you got to put on the big girl britches and just go.
Yeah.
Yeah, because lots of the times the women are the emotional, center of a family. So
Yeah, which I'm okay with that, and I'm okay saying it or hearing it. And I know today people are like, oh, we have to be, men, and I'm like, no, I'm okay not being man. I'm not Joe. I was a tomboy growing up, but I'm not Joe.
Right. No, I'm not Joe either. And that was the same for me. Like I never had Barbie dolls or things like that, but I was in a house with just my dad and my brother after the age of 7. So I grew up in a house with just guys. And so I mostly played like gender neutral or boyish type toys. I didn't have Barbies and all of that stuff. So I wasn't very feminine, but I was feminine in the sense that I always wanted to be a mom, and I never really had like career aspirations and all of those things, So, but yeah, I'm not an Amy. I'm not a Joe. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's little bits that I could identify. Not much with Beth.
No.
But Joe's spunk and speaking her mind, I can be like that, depending on the situation.
Or having aspirations beyond a family. Like Meg is very dutiful and does a wonderful job with her family, but that's the end of her aspirations, it seems.
Right. But the fact that she's Molly Manners, I have always loved. Absolutely love that. She's like, oh no, you need to do the right behavior. Like, no, don't act that way. Because I'm still like that. You should see me with my husband's, like, with our nephews. I'm so tense, and I'm like, oh my God, they're throwing the ball in the house. Ah!
Yeah, when you have 4 boys, you just gotta let some of that stuff go. So
I can't.
And growing up in a house with just guys, I never really learned that stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
One thing when I was in college at University of Arizona, I was involved in the Women's Center and on campus, and we noticed that there was a large majority of women that were actively involved in the Women's Center that did not have mothers. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so I think there is something too, like if you don't have that feminine archetype to follow as a child, it's maybe easier to see. I don't know what it was like.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So we were all like our budding little feminists and having grown up in houses with men. So I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, my dad was the only one around, but my parents split up when I was in 3rd grade. But so it was just my mom, my sister, and I. And my sister was, oh my gosh, just pretty and feminine, and so feminine girly girl, so I'm like, I'm funny, I'll go play with trucks. And so I was just kind of weird. And then I really got into literature, and I really liked that kind of stuff, and so I just went off in my own little world.
Yeah. Well, I clearly did not get into literature because I'm just reading these books for the first time. I was too busy reading like Tom Robbins and Stephen King and Kurt Vonnegut and stuff like that when I was in high school.
And I've never read any
of on my dad's bookshelves. So that's
I've never read any of that. Well, my mom pretty much only read Harlequin romances, but she would take us to the library, and to this day I've never read one. But she would take us to the library, and I would just load up. And then she was really sweet. She would buy me like books of poetry and, to kind of foster my love of literature and stuff. And I don't know. I loved it. And then when I was teaching college, I would teach what I consider my old friends and my students, and I'd be so excited, and my students would be looking like they were in pain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do you guys not read anymore? And they just don't read that. They just don't read it anymore, which is why. So I was really happy that you were reading these. And I know we'll have to do Anna Green Gables another time. I do need to reread that because I don't remember all the details. But I know that you had some issues with her.
Yes. But I did read the second book, and it wasn't so bad. But here's what I would love. If we had a chat where we compared Anne and whatever the girl's name was from The Secret Garden, I don't remember,
I don't remember either.
And some of the other, like maybe Laura.
Oh, you need to read Heidi.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'll do that. And then like maybe some modern ones. Like I keep telling everybody I know how much I love The War That Saved My Life. I think that is just such a fantastic book. And it's a modern book. It was just written a couple years ago, but with a young girl protagonist that I just think is fantastic. And there's 2 books in that series. So I think about that a lot, like what she's like compared to what these other girls are like. I would love to have that conversation.
So you're going to make me read something modern.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I'm really bad about looking down at the chat. I don't know if I can read something modern. It might hurt.
Okay, well, speaking of that, before we go, I was reading about Charlotte Mason curriculums the other day. And they were talking about why they focus more on the old books. And one of the things they said that I'd not really thought about, but I'm sure you can relate to, is that the reason why they focus on the older books is because the sentence structure is more complex and more like involved and complicated than modern writing. And so that the thinking is, I guess, that it's good for children to read more complex things. Even if it's children's books, the sentence structure and everything is still more complex than the writing is today. So do you agree with that? What do you think of that?
I agree with that, but I don't think that's the only reason. I think that...
No, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why.
It is one of the reasons, and why we focus on classic literature is, again, it goes back to that universal theme about this idea that it captures humanity and you can learn from it and you can learn how to behave, how to think, how to deal with different situations. That's what classic literature teaches you. And modern literature, and that's why it's called timeless, right? Because you can pick up a book written in the Renaissance and read it. Like I just read Machiavelli's The Prince with I have one student that I still tutor. And he's like, oh my gosh. I'm like, right? It's still it still makes sense. Little Women, there are still things in there. Now, may not be exactly the same, but those decisions those girls are making and how they come to their conclusions, we can still use that. Kids can still learn from that. And I think modern stories, I would put Harry Potter in that category of being a classic. It's a modern classic, right? But definitely they do have cultural and historical context, and they teach, but also teaching historical and cultural context when you're reading those novels is really important. Yeah. And so I think Harry Potter, the stories are universal. There are traits that in 1,000 years are still going, those characters, those things, how they face things. It's heroic. You can, look up, you can look up to certain characters, and then you look at other characters and you're like, no, that's bad behavior. I don't want to emulate that. Yeah. Although if you go to Universal Studios, everybody's walking around in Slytherin robes, and I don't really understand it.
Well, we're not going to talk about Snape. I just don't get that. I don't get that at all. But I totally agree with what you're saying. And do you know who Nassim Taleb is? Who he wrote Black Swan? Yeah. His book Antifragile is.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it. I might even have it on the bookshelf. Maybe the best book
I've ever read. Okay, so it's definitely in my top 3, and I reread that book more than any other book. But one of the things he's big on is ideas. The longer an idea has been around, or the longer a book has been around, the longer it will be around. So
that makes absolute sense.
He has a rule about not reading things that are younger than, like, I don't know what it is, like 50 or 100 years.
That sounds like me up until I met my husband.
Yes, because time proves things. So if something has been around that long, it's proved itself, and it is worthy of being read. Versus, most people are just reading the things that came out this year. And you might not realize that, this interesting take on habit formation that came out this year, like Atomic Habits, okay? Right. Might be the same stuff that Montaigne was talking about in the 1400s.
It's exactly right.
You know what I mean?
A little bit, yeah. It's exactly right. I mean, that's why you go back and read Aristotle's Ethics. I think the world needs to read Aristotle's Ethics. Just read it. it's all about how to be happy, how to have friends, and how to be a human being.
Yes.
And if everybody in the world read that, I guarantee you we would be in a nicer society.
Yes. Yes.
That's all.
So we all want to read
You don't
the
need a
latest and
self-help. You don't need a modern self-help book, although I do tend to read them because, I don't know, I'm kind of like you. I'm interested in that crazy stuff. And I have my Enneagram books and all that.
Yeah.
But go back to Aristotle. It's already been said.
Yep.
And that's all you need.
Called Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations that I felt like was a very, very good modern introduction to philosophy and how it can be useful today. So, yeah, so there's a lot of good entryways into philosophy that are modern, but then you need to go back and read the actual stuff, or at least read somebody talking about that old stuff. You know, you don't.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can read it yourself, but you can also just, like, I'm reading a book right now about Adam Smith's. What did he write on the
Wealth of Nations?
No, the other thing he wrote that was more like philosophy on happiness.
Yeah. I forget the title.
But it's a book about that book. So it's a book introducing me to the ideas of Adam Smith and talking through it. And it's really entertaining and interesting to read. So then maybe someday I will go back and actually read.
See, that's I think the missing link is that when you're reading, I'm going to be teacher mode, sorry. But when you're reading that, pull out Adam Smith. We just had this unit on Frontier, and along with that novel Shane, which is about the Old West and the issues between homesteaders and then the cattle wranglers, we had a whole thing on Lewis and Clark and pulling in their journals to show like what this new exploration, and so putting everything into context is just really cool, and then looking at the actual sources. So when you read a secondary text, it's great. It's a great introduction, but I'm always of the opinion, and even when you read a translation, there's a little bit of language, and they have to decide what word to put in, so there's still a little bit of that. Yeah. But if you go back and even if you read a translation of Adam Smith, you may say, oh, well, this guy interpreted it this way, but I don't know, so let me go see what someone else said about it. And it's a sort of triangulation, and I think that's what's missing in the world today, is that we just have people talking to us, and we're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But we're not triangulating everything.
Right.
So go back to Aristotle, once again, and learn how to, observe and formulate your own opinions.
I think one of the reasons why Nassim Taleb is so brilliant and brings so much to the world, and also the guy that wrote Sapiens, I don't remember his name, but he is also brilliant. It's going to come to me. Both of them have, well, especially Taleb, what he calls FU money. So he's made enough money in his life that he can be a man of books now. And that's what he does with his time, is he learns and he studies and he writes. And Harari, is that his name?
I have the book Sapiens, and I've read it. I have some very strong disagreements with it, though.
Have you read Homo Deus?
No.
Okay, that was his next one. And then there's 21 Problems for the 21st Century is his third book.
Yeah.
So they were all extremely interesting.
They're very interesting.
You would have problems with them. But he's very strict, too, on not having, like, a cell phone or any distractions in his life so that he can actually focus and spend the time doing what is going to, serve the world, which is writing and thinking and presenting interesting ideas to the world.
Well, that's the whole thing, Yeah. So I just think people need to read. That's all. Be like me.
Okay, so Jack and I were reading Dog Man, the cartoon, it's written by the same people that wrote Captain Underpants, okay? So one of the little kids in Jack's school, I was Zooming with him the other day, and he recommended Dog Man. He's 7, okay? So he recommended Dog Man, which is this graphic novel. So Jack and I were reading it, and there's this storyline where this evil cat figures out how he creates this ray gun that erases all the words from all the books in the world, so all the books are blank. So then everybody becomes stupid. As soon as the words are returned to the book, everybody can start reading again, and then everybody becomes smart again.
Oh, that's
funny.
So
cute.
That is
a nice
funny.
little message right there.
It is a nice little message, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Deanna, we've been talking for almost 50 minutes.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Again, it's so long. Okay, so we're going to do our homework, and we'll have like part 3 where we talk about like
ladies.
Ladies. Yeah.
Lady
and then
children.
someone
Sarah,
in there
I
said
think it was Sarah that suggested that we throw in the Pride and Prejudice girls too.
yes, that's what I was just going to say. So we got to throw in the sisters from Pride and Prejudice. Now that's probably going to be a 5-hour video because I'm such a Janeite. I could talk about Jane Austen and for the rest of my life.
Okay. All right. Well, you got to give me a little bit of time to prepare for that. But maybe in like 3 weeks we can get back on and talk about it.
That sounds good.
Okay.
We got a plan.
All right. So, Deanna, tell everybody where to find you on Instagram.
So you can find me on Instagram, Pisan Academy, Pisan Academy. And we have Facebook. We have a YouTube video. And we're relaunching in June with our new literature curriculum. There's my plug.
Okay,
yeah.
Awesome.
Okay,
well, thank you for joining me, and thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
Deanna.